Roughly 1.5 million years ago in what's now Kenya's Lake Turkana region, early humans did something revolutionary. They learned to control fire. This wasn't about creating it yet, that milestone came later, but about taming wild flames. Archaeological sites like Kubifora show burn patterns and charred bones nestled among stone tools, pointing to Homo erectus gathering around fires not just to cook, but to warm their chilled bodies as evening descended. Imagine the scene. The African night falls cold and fast. A small group crouches in a loose circle, the red-orange glow flickering on their faces. Behind them, the dark looms vast and unknowable. In front, a dancing flame offers protection, light, and, most critically, heat. Its warmth not just for the flesh, but for the psyche. Before fire, the night was an enemy. With fire, it became something they could endure. Mainstream scholars agree that this was a turning point. Fire allowed early humans to push into colder climates. It dried out soaked furs, it softened tough meat and roots, it kept predators away. But more subtly, it fostered nighttime socializing, an overlooked yet critical component of communal survival. Some anthropologists even suggest that storytelling itself may have originated in firelight safety, but not everyone agrees on how widespread fire use really was. Some argue that evidence at these early sites is circumstantial. Natural wildfires can also char bones, after all. Did humans maintain these blazes intentionally, feeding them with wood? Or did they merely stumble upon still-burning trees and squat there until the coals died out? Scholars still debate whether Homo erectus mastered the art of fire tending, or simply took advantage of it opportunistically. Curiously, fringe theories claim that early humans may have learned from watching animals, such as birds who drop burning twigs into dry grass to flush out prey. One tantalizing hypothesis even suggests that they followed savanna fires to feast on cooked remains before realizing the heat could be theirs to command. Regardless of the precise origin, this was our ancestors' first great thermal leap. Fire didn't just change how they ate or stayed safe, it rewrote how they existed in a world that could kill with cold, just as swiftly as it could with claws. From here, their methods would only grow more creative, more desperate, and often more brutal. As early humans pushed northward into colder, harsher climates, places like Ice Age Europe or the windswept steppes of Central Asia, they quickly realized that fire alone wasn't enough. Open flames were fickle friends in a snowstorm. Wind howled through primitive camps like invisible wolves, stripping away body heat and making even the hottest fire feel distant. So our ancestors turned to another strategy: build with the bones of the earth. This was insulation by intuition. Rocks absorbed the sun's meager heat during the day, releasing it slowly as darkness fell. Some early human groups even dug shallow pits behind these walls to sleep in, letting the earth cradle them, buffering the cold from below. Scholars still debate whether these were permanent seasonal dwellings or temporary wind camps built during hunting excursions. Some believe certain formations may have held ceremonial significance, aligning with moon phases or solstice sunrises. Others argue they were purely functional, born not of ritual but raw necessity. In fringe interpretations, a few researchers point to oddly shaped stone arrangements that may have functioned like primitive heat reflectors, bouncing firelight inward, creating warm zones without requiring direct contact with flame. While unproven, it hints at an ancient ingenuity that often goes unappreciated. Interestingly, some of the earliest stone architecture wasn't built to live in, it was built to survive the night. This shift from fire as a central survival tool to structures that partnered with fire marked a quiet evolution. It showed that early humans weren't just reactive, they were planners adapting to an environment by reshaping it, stone by stone. And as they built higher and dug deeper, they discovered a new ally in their fight against cold: the warmth of another living body. At some point, humans stopped merely hunting animals for meat and began coveting their skin. The Ice Age was merciless, and food alone couldn't ward off the deep, bone-soaking chill. But nature, in all its grim irony, had already outfitted other creatures for survival. Early humans learned to steal those adaptations, and in doing so, they created the foundation of clothing. Archaeological digs in Siberia and northern Europe reveal tools specifically used for hide scraping and tanning as early as 40,000 years ago. At Yana RHS in Arctic Russia, an Upper Paleolithic site dated to around 32,000 years ago, researchers found carved ivory needles, a tiny but profound innovation. With these, humans could stitch together hides into wearable warmth, no longer reliant on draping skins haphazardly. They were making clothes, not just coverings, but it wasn't easy. Processing animal hides was a brutal task. Raw skin stank, stiffened, and rotted. So our ancestors softened them with animal brains, urine, or even chewed them manually. Tanning wasn't just a smelly chore, it was a survival ritual, and the larger the animal, the greater the prize. Mammoths, with their thick, shaggy coats and immense size, became walking wardrobes. Wearing a mammoth wasn't just about heat, it was status. Scholars speculate that cloaks made from enormous tusked beasts could have served dual purposes, keeping you alive and making you look like a legend among your clan. Some even argue that certain pelt combinations, like reindeer over wolf, were used for specific weather conditions, a kind of prehistoric layering system. And then there are the fringe theories. A few researchers point to evidence of dyed hides, ochre-stained fur, or patterned cuts, which might suggest early forms of fashion or clan identity. Was it camouflage, symbolism, or just the first flickers of human self-expression? Still, scholars debate whether these garments were sewn for daily use or reserved for rituals and migration periods. We don't have full examples, only fragments, tools, and the bones of the animals who wore them first. One particularly haunting theory posits that during particularly lean winters, humans may have worn the skins of their dead as a final act of survival, an idea largely rejected but impossible to disprove. What is clear is this: clothing wasn't born of modesty or style, it was born of exposure and fear. To wear the fur of another was to cheat death, wrapping yourself in warmth you didn't grow, stitched by hands that knew cold as an enemy. Next, they would seek warmth not just from the outside in, but from deep within the earth itself. Long before geothermal spas became the domain of luxury resorts, our ancestors discovered the raw power of the earth's core, and they weren't afraid to get close. In places where volcanic activity bubbled near the surface, early humans sometimes took terrifying risks for the promise of warmth. One of the most striking examples lies in Italy's Campi Flegrei region, near modern-day Naples. This vast volcanic area was active even during the Paleolithic era, and nearby archaeological sites like Paghetti Vecchi and Grotta Guattari show evidence of hominins occupying geothermal-adjacent zones. Some researchers believe these ancient humans, likely Homo heidelbergensis or Neanderthals, deliberately settled near warm springs and geothermal vents, despite the danger. Why? Because even a steaming crack in the ground could mean survival. Volcanic ash, particularly the fine-grained kind that blankets the earth after eruptions, has exceptional insulating properties. There are signs that early humans used it to line shelters or even bury their fire pits to retain heat longer. In some areas, they appear to have dug shallow depressions in geothermally warmed soil, bedding down in naturally heated hollows, a Stone Age version of radiant floor heating. But this came with brutal trade-offs. Toxic gases, sudden tremors, or scorching steam vents made these areas perilous. Some fringe anthropologists suggest that entire families perished in their sleep, overcome by invisible sulfur fumes. Others believe these thermal zones may have taken on spiritual significance, viewed not just as warm havens but as places of divine power. Scholars still debate whether humans actively sought volcanic areas for warmth, or merely took temporary refuge when caught nearby. After all, many geothermal zones also held abundant resources: mineral-rich soils, warm water for cleaning, and animals drawn to the same heat. Survival might have simply meant taking what the land gave, no matter how volatile. A fringe theory even posits that volcanic activity helped inspire early mythologies about underworlds and gods of fire, an origin story, born not from imagination, but from daily proximity to the rumbling earth below. Regardless, these thermal tactics weren't widespread. Only a few areas on the planet offered such deadly comforts. But for those who lived near them, the earth was not just home, it was heater, threat, and sometimes tomb. Still, fire and fur could only do so much. As temperatures plummeted and winds grew crueler, survival demanded another strategy, one that came from within the body, not outside of it. Warmth, it turns out, isn't just something we wrap around our bodies, it's something we can become. In the unrelenting cold of prehistoric winters, early humans discovered that fat wasn't merely a source of energy, it was insulation, and they went to extreme, sometimes bizarre lengths to acquire it. At the Upper Paleolithic site of Dolny Viestanis, Again in modern-day Czech Republic, archaeologists have found butchered remains of reindeer, mammoths, and other high-fat animals. Notably, the most prized cuts weren't lean muscle but fat-rich organs, marrow-filled bones, blubberous belly tissue, and brains. These weren't just nutritional jackpots, they were strategic insulation in the fight against frostbite and hypothermia. For populations living in glacial regions like Siberia and the Arctic Circle, fat became more than fuel. Whale blubber, bear fat, and even concentrated bone grease were consumed in quantities that would stun a modern dietitian. Some researchers argue that humans deliberately overhunted animals in winter not for meat, but for their dense fat stores. Interestingly, fringe interpretations propose that in some nomadic tribes fat was revered almost spiritually. Among the Inuit, whose practices offer parallels to prehistoric survival, animal fat was not just food, but medicine, lamp fuel, and skin balm. Grease was smeared directly onto the skin to seal in body heat and protect against windburn. It's entirely possible that ancient humans used similar methods, turning themselves into slick, glistening insulation machines. Scholars still debate whether early humans were capable of storing fat themselves in preparation for winter, like natural hibernators. While human biology doesn't allow true hibernation, there is evidence of seasonal weight gain among certain populations. Ethnographic studies of cold climate hunter-gatherers show cyclical shifts in body mass that hint at ancient metabolic adaptations. One quirky but plausible theory suggests early humans may have deliberately overfed themselves and their children in late summer and fall, mimicking the fattening patterns of animals. In a world without modern medicine, chubbiness wasn't a health risk, it was a thermal strategy. The rounder you were, the longer you survived. At Pleistocene sites across Eurasia, the bones of giant deer and woolly rhinos appear meticulously cracked and boiled, their marrow extracted with obsessive care. Fat rendered from these bones could be stored in animal bladders or intestines, primitive canisters of life-saving lard. In the end, fat was a quiet, invisible blanket, layered under skin, fueling fire, greasing tools, and coating faces. And for the humans who mastered its use, it was a form of warmth that didn't flicker in the wind or rot on the line. But even the best fat stores couldn't replace the one warmth no one could provide alone: the heat of the pack. Long before weighted blankets or central heating, early humans turned to a method older than tools: each other. Communal sleeping wasn't just a cultural choice, it was biological necessity.